This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt. I had us muted. Look, we are on to a fabulous start here since I've been back. Welcome in, everyone, to this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. Damien and Matt here with you as we have some big-time moves to talk about. We have Alex Bregman signing with the Red Sox. Nick Pivetta went to the Padres. Pete Alonso re-signed with the Mets. We got some interesting Mike Trout news. Just a ton of stuff to wrap up on here as spring training is starting. But Matt, how you doing? It's been a couple weeks. It's actually been like a month almost since I've talked to you. So what's going on?
Not too much. Everything's going pretty good. I'm excited because guess what? There are baseball players in camp right now. So we have baseball starting. In fact, I believe the Dodgers and Cubs, since they're playing that early series overseas, I believe their first game is actually Thursday. So we have baseball this week that will be played professionally on a diamond. So very good news there. Super excited. Everything else has been good. Been enjoying. I've actually been watching a lot of the Four Nations face-off for the NHL. It is by far the best all-star event that I've ever seen from a league. The fact that it's going against the NBA All-Star game is just absolutely hilarious to me. We had the Daytona 500 yesterday too. That was something. I don't think we're going to want to talk about that too much because as a traditional NASCAR fan, I did not enjoy that at all. And Damien probably enjoyed it a little bit more than me, but probably not that much more. So definitely, but it was definitely something to watch. And it's been good. How are you doing, Damien, after your little sabbatical?
Yeah, so I was going through some stuff here, so not gonna get too deep into that, but we're all good. We're all back. I was kind of jonesing to talk some baseball. It's been a little bit, so the spring was winding down, and then now we finally saw pitchers and catchers report. Obviously the Dodgers reported a little bit earlier, so I've had that content for about a week already. So it's been pretty fun from that aspect. But like you said, game starts on Thursday, Dodgers versus Cubs, and man, it's so good. I mean, it's spring training baseball. Like, regular players aren't going to play the first game really. You might get one or two, but man, it's baseball's being played, right? Like, and college baseball's fun, but even spring training baseball is just there's a different level to it. It's just it's so much fun. So I can't wait for that to happen. But as we've saw here wrapping up, we've got some big time moves that we could finally talk about and wrap up and stop this saga that we've had about where's Alex Bregman going to sign? Is he going to take the short term high AAV deal? Does he still want the 7-year deal? Apparently, is he going to go back to Houston after all of this time? Is it going to be Detroit, which most people thought? And it ends up being the Red Sox. And it ends up being that, the day before it was, hey, he's still going to take a long-term deal, still wants at least 7 years. And the Tigers have given that to him. So everyone's like, well, it's going to go to the Tigers. And then out of nowhere, a 3-year, $120 million deal with the Boston Red Sox, $40 million AAV. I think it's like $20 million of the deal is
I think deferred is 20
deferred.
million, maybe. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
let me double check it.
I
Yeah,
believe that's correct.
yeah, 20 million per year. So 60 million in total.
Okay.
So the present day value is 31.7 a year, down from 40 million, but still, this is a massive deal for the Red Sox. I think it's a great fit there offensively. Now, as we're talking about Bregman, we have to also talk about the elephant in the room that happens today with Rafael Devers. But let's start with the Bregman fit in Boston, at least offensively, and what we think that Bregman can bring to this Red Sox team.
Yeah, so this was a very, very interesting signing for me. Alex Bregman, a long time, really, really good player. He's been with Houston his entire career. Was part of their World Series teams multiple times. Was a top 5 MVP candidate. Has had a couple of elite offensive seasons. Always been a above average to really good defender. So this is one of the best third basemen in baseball. And you're talking about somebody who I don't think everybody believes fully in his ability for his game to translate. I think a lot of people believe, at least his offensive game, I think a lot of people believe that the Crawford boxes play a big part of him as a pull hitter in Houston, as a right-handed pull hitter. I don't think he hits the ball particularly hard. His biggest skill has always been, on base and, not striking out. His plate discipline numbers are incredible. In his career, he has a 12% walk rate, a 13% K rate. That's really, really, really good numbers. But, he's going over to Fenway Park, which is another ballpark that is very good for right-handed hitters, hit peppering the Green Monster. I think that this could be a good fit offensively for him. Obviously, defensively, he is a huge upgrade defensively over Devers. But as you mentioned, there might be some issues there because Devers is very unhappy with this, and it sounds like the communication between the front office and the manager and Devers was not good in this situation either. So, that's going to be a big factor. And I know that, the Red Sox at second base have had some issues over the past couple of years. I believe this year, as of right now, I believe I'm assuming Vaughn Grissom is their guy at second, right?
The plan I think right now is actually Christian Campbell is
Yeah,
who they want to be, which is a highly established prospect for them.
right.
Um, so I think the plan is that they want Campbell to be the second baseman. And to say what the situation is with Devers, basically when he signed his long-term deal under the old regime in Boston, which was the Heim Bloom regime, he was basically promised that he was going to be the long-term third baseman. He doesn't want to move off third base. He doesn't want to become a DH. He doesn't want to move to first base. He wants to be a third baseman, and that old regime basically promised him that. Well, now that Craig Breslow's in here and he's running the show, it seems like Breslow is understanding that Devers is a really bad defensive third baseman. He was like -6 outs above
Yeah.
average last year. Um, and they basically want to make a change. They want Devers to either become a DH or a first baseman. Now they still have Tristan Cassis and Masataka Yoshida, so that's a little interesting there as well. But they make this deal to sign Bregman, and initially the report was like, well, Bregman's going to play second, which moving him over, okay. But then everyone's like, well, he's such a better defender at third base.
Yeah.
It kind of makes the most sense. And then Boston really likes Christian Campbell as well. So now it seems like Bregman is going to play third again, where he is a +6 outs above average. So really, it's a 12 swing in
Yeah.
outs above average there defensively at third base. But Devers isn't willing to DH or play first base. So it's, and you even have like Alex Cora saying like, "Hey, that was the old regime. And they're in St. Louis, not us."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's what's interesting to me. I mean, if you look at the Red Sox, I mean, Yoshida has to DH. Like he cannot play. He has no position he can play at an adequate level.
play left
And
bench.
I mean, you could throw him on the bench, but I mean, there's a lot of money tied up in Yoshida from that front office. I believe that's the current front office that signed him, right? It wasn't Heim Bloom, was it?
I think it was Heim.
Maybe it was Heim Bloom. Either way, there's a lot of money tied up in Yoshida. You've got. I mean, I just it feels to me like Bregman should be playing second base because I think his skill set will translate there fine. I think that he's played there before, like for first couple of years in the majors. He played there a little bit. He played there some in the minors. At LSU, he played there a good bit. I think he could translate pretty well there, and that's a hole for them. I mean, last year it was a hole, and I know they might like Christian Campbell, but that's a spot where you just don't. I don't know. It's just difficult for me to believe that you're going to alienate your franchise iconic player right now, your best player in your franchise, in Rafael Devers, who, while he might not be great at third base, Bregman is a big upgrade at second base too. So I don't know. I mean, I think the best thing you could probably do is put Bregman at second, Devers at third. Maybe certain matchups you put Campbell in and sit Devers or sit Yoshida and let Devers DH sometimes, that kind of thing. And then maybe defensive replacement at the end of games for Devers. I think that's probably your best bet for the way to smooth this thing over, because I don't think that you're going to even consider trading Devers, right? I mean, if you're trying to compete, that just adds another hole. And what good did signing Bregman do? He might be gone after this year if he has a good year. So all you did was just kick the can down another year and lose your best player. I mean, so I think that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, the contract to me is fine. I'm never a huge fan of a 3 or 4 year commitment to a guy when they have to make a 1 year commitment to you. I think that there's a lot of risk in that, in the fact that the next 2 years you might be on the hook for $31 million if Bregman ends up not doing well. Um, I think chances are Bregman's a pretty safe player, and he will do well enough to at least earn that money if he comes back. But he seems to me right now like he's a safe player that doesn't have a huge upside. But I think that he's solid, and I mean he makes the Red Sox better. I mean the Red Sox are a team now that you look at their lineup. You got Jaron Duran, Rafael Devers, Alex Bregman. You got Tristan Costa still in there. Trevor Story. What are you going to get from him? Um, and then you got Cedon Rafaela, who's an interesting guy, who's a former top prospect. And then you've got a lot of really good prospects too, like Roman Anthony and um, Marcel Meyer, all those guys.
Yeah.
So I think that I definitely think that this team, and then you add in their pitching staff has got some good pieces in it now too.
Yeah.
I think this team's gotten a lot better this offseason. I think this caps it off. So at the end of the day, good for the Red Sox on making this move, but there's a lot that needs to be smoothed over here for it to work out.
Yeah, I think I have a different perspective on it than you do, because I think if Rafael Devers is really committed to the Red Sox and really wants to commit to winning and wants to do what is best for this organization, then he would realize that he is a god awful third baseman defensively, and be willing to take a move to first base or DH, which is his long term home anyways. Like
Yeah.
he's he's 28 right now. Like, what are the odds that in 3 years you're still playing third base anyways? Like, I don't think it's that good of odds. So if you have a chance to make the team better defensively right now and get another young guy in there, Christian Campbell, then be willing to make the move, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a DH. Now, I know some guys have a problem with, like, hey, I want to be more involved in the game. Okay,
Yeah.
well then maybe be at first base, and maybe you get with Cassis and figure out if he can DH, or whatever, and work at it from that point. But I
Yeah.
think you have to realize, like, hey, you are the leader of this team. You're trying to set an example right now.
Hmm.
Most franchise players are willing to move positions if it helps make the team better, or they
Yeah.
feel it, right? We've seen, and I know this is a little bit of a homer example. We've seen Mookie Betts move from right field to second base to shortstop because he said, hey, whatever we feel helps the team be the best, I'll do it. He has consistently said for 2 years, I want to play on the infield. I want to be an infielder. But when he got injured last year and he came back, the team was like, hey, we kind of have a hole in right field and you're a gold glove right fielder. And he's like, okay, I'll go play right field. Then what they do this year, he's like, hey, I kind of want to play shortstop. And they're like, okay, we'll make that work. We'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll do that. I think you have to be willing to make some moves to pay the benefit of your team if you are going to be the face of an organization. And I just think Devers, if you really look down at it, why are you being so stubborn about being a bad defensive third baseman and moving off your position? I can
Yeah.
understand it if you were a gold glove level, or even
Right.
if you were the same level defender as Alex Bregman, which is like hey, you're pretty good, or even a league average, but you are one of the worst defensive third basemen. You should be willing to make a move to help your team get better. And I guess that's my problem. And him saying, well, I was lied to. Well, no, you weren't lied to. That was a previous regime that made you this commitment. The new regime doesn't have to uphold that commitment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm with you to a certain level on that too. I get it. I don't know that Mookie's the perfect example, just because Mookie is good at literally everything.
Well, yeah,
So it's one thing to tell a guy, "Hey, you need to move off of third base because you just suck at it and you can't play it." That pisses a player off. Mookie, they're saying, "Hey, you help the team better if you're in right field because you're good at both, but we have a hole there." That's a little bit of a different thing for me. But either way, and I don't know that Devers can really play first base at a high level either. I know it's a less valuable position, but he doesn't really have the height for first base. I don't know how flexible he is to stretch and make good, and make and get a few more outs at first base, that type of thing. And obviously being on the infield, I don't know that throwing is really his problem. I think his range is mainly his problem at third base. So being on the infield, that's tough. But I mean, you know, I get it. I get why Devers wouldn't want a DH. Um, I think it's a little bit less of a thing because Devers already got his contract, and I
yeah,
think that a big part of DH or not wanting to DH would be because teams don't value DHs as highly. You might not get paid as much money in free agency if teams know you're relegated to
sure.
DH, but he's not going to have to worry about that because it's
Exactly.
Devers and he's got a $313 million contract
Yeah.
already. So there's no worry about that. So I think the big thing for me is just, I mean, if Devers, you could help your team out by letting this slide a little bit, just do what it takes to help your team out. And the Red Sox, you could communicate better because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the previous front office, they might have promised him something, but Craig Breslow, you need to at least talk to him and tell him, hey, look, I know this poor former front office. You can't just sign the guy and then try to smooth it over. Like that's not the way you should be communicating. That's a good way to alienate your clubhouse. But I think that you definitely are. I think you're definitely in a situation where something needs to change between the two parties, but I think it will
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, Devers is locked in with the Red Sox because he can't go anywhere. He's already signed his contract, and the Red Sox are kind of locked in with Devers. They're not going to trade him because he's one of their best players, and they're trying to compete. And you're not going to get another Rafael Devers just sitting out there
Yeah.
doing nothing. So I definitely see that this resolving itself eventually, but it's definitely an interesting topic, and it makes the signing a little bit strange. But I think, and I think there were better fits for Bregman from a what team he should go play for standpoint. But uh, the Red Sox, I mean, they got better. So
Yeah.
who am I to doubt them?
Yeah, last point. I just want for pure chaos like reasons. I just want Alex Cora not to say anything and then just submit the lineup card on opening day with Devers at DH and
Oh
just
man,
watch the absolute cinema that would be. That would be
yeah,
kind of funny.
yeah.
But let's move over to talking about the Padres and them signing Nick Pivetta to a 4-year, $55 million deal. This is also a really interesting deal because he only is making $1 million in 2025. So if you remember, Pivetta did get the qualifying offer, and we all said he should probably just take that. We didn't think he was going to get much value out there, and it took him a while. And there were some concerns about some medicals and stuff from there, but the Padres have been hurting for money. Basically, they are broke basically since the new ownership or has basically had a fight over who should take over it after Peter Seidler died. But yeah, he's only making $1 million in 2025 with I think it's like a $3 million signing bonus or something. But then that jumps up to what is it? I
Probably,
forget. It's like $19 million
yeah. I was gonna say
next
it's got to
year.
be around 18, 19, something like
It's
that.
like 19 in like 2026 and then 14 in 2027.
Yeah.
But there is an opt out and then player options. So weird, but interesting contract. But I think the big thing to take away from this is that the Padres have basically said now that they're going to plan to hold on to Michael King and Dylan Cease with Yu Darvish, and so now Pavetta kind of slots into that fourth starter for them. Obviously, Musgrove's going to miss this year, but gives them still another starter to go there. And Pavetta's always had someone whose underlying metrics have been better than his real life metrics. So maybe Ruben Niebla is able to work some magic on Pavetta here.
Yeah, Pavetta is an interesting guy because he's never had an ERA better than
Yeah,
4.04 in his entire career, which is in 2023. But over the last since he's been in Boston, since he got traded mid-season 2020, so 2021 till through last year, his highest ERA was like 4.5. So he's been a really consistent low fours ERA guy, and the metrics have shown that, and maybe a little bit more could be in there too, like you mentioned. His home run per fly ball rate has always been really high. That's something that might be remedied a little bit in San Diego with the marine layer sometimes, and you've got that's typically been a fairly good park to pitch in. Um, so that could help out for him. The Padres are a really interesting situation because they obviously had Peter Seidler, who was spending a lot of money, really wanted to get a world championship because he knew he was not doing super well health wise. Then he passed away, and all this high payroll that he had been paying up, he had been in win now mode for a while, and you're going to have some huge contracts here in the next 3 or 4 years for players who are getting on up there, like Manny Machado and Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish. Those players are starting to get up there in age, and you don't have a way to just spend your way through it because you no longer have that super high payroll capacity that Peter Seidler was willing to carry. Now, I do think the interesting thing. I think I read a thing the other day that one of the owners, the potential owners, kind of took over. Is that correct? You would probably know more about this specific situation, Damien. One of the kids took over fully, or
no, so it's one of Peter Seidler's brothers.
okay,
There's two brothers that are in one side of it, and then Peter Seidler's wife is on the other side,
okay,
and they're fighting over who should get it. And the brothers are saying that basically Peter had said that she didn't want anything to do with it, so it's their responsibility.
Right.
And now she's saying she didn't say that and she wants it because
Okay.
they're tarnishing Peter's legacy. So
Yeah.
it's a real nasty behind the scenes thing, but the whole point of it basically is that the two brothers have kind of taken over and they're like, "Hey, we can't spend money."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, it sounded like there was some kind of resolution to that over the last couple weeks. Then immediately Nick Pivetta signs. So I thought that was interesting. And it might be a coincidence, but
yeah.
it was definitely interesting. And of course, the way you mentioned the contract being structured, having the $1 million this year. Well, Michael King has the option after this year, the team option,
Yeah.
I believe. So um, that would be the potential, like, oh, we can't spend any more money. We're going to drop Michael King. We'll have Pavetta. He's going to be the replacement type thing
Well,
for
and
me.
Cease is a free agent.
And Cease will be a free agent, so they'll be able to remedy their money next year. But bringing in Pavetta for just paying him $1 million this year, that should help the situation right now.
Yeah.
So
So let's jump over to talking about Pete Alonso's deal, because this is another really kind of interesting one. There was a long time where everyone thought like him going to the Mets or back to the Mets is a foregone conclusion, and then it was like, well, nope, the Mets have basically said they're out. They're moving on from him. We don't know where he's going to go. Um, and then he ends up getting. Do I have this right? Where'd he go? Sorry. He ends up getting a 2-year, $54 million deal that has an opt out after the first year there. Um, this is just a really weird scenario.
yeah,
That Pete, I mean, technically, if we're talking about it, Nick Pivetta got more money than Pete Alonso. Oh,
he did.
total guaranteed. Um, but yeah, I think there was a deal that Pete turned down for 3 years from the Mets, which had more money in it. But I don't know what. I think it was only opt out after the second year and not the first year. So some weird stuff there. But I guess in hindsight, just Pete Alonso's back to the Mets for another year after they got Soto and they've done some other stuff, which means Vientos is going to be staying at third base there. Um, so what do you think about Pete going back to the Mets?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mets definitely needed to bring him back. I mean, once there had been a lot of rumors about Bregman before the offseason, thinking the Mets will move Vientos to first, Pete will be gone, they'll bring in Bregman, it'll be a good situation there. But I think that obviously they needed a corner infielder of some kind because Brett Beatty just didn't ever develop, and he was a top prospect for them. They expected to be really good. He just didn't. He just didn't have it, and he probably needs a change of scenery now. We'll see what happens with him, but I mean, I thought the contract was pretty fair for Pete. I think that there's some reason to believe there, but at the same time, his 2024 showed some pretty alarming signs. Um, his um, his expected average was career low. Expected slugging was a career low. His xWOBA was a career low. His weighted on base average was a career low. His hard hit rate was not great. It was fine, but it was not great. He had a career low in other than 2019 in fly ball rate. It was down 5% from 2023, and it just wasn't a great year. He had a higher strikeout rate than he's had since 2020. There's some signs here that Pete's not quite the same as he was, and there's just a little bit of caution flag there. He had a 122 WRC plus, but you got to remember we were talking about Devers a minute ago as poor defense, and how does offense weigh against that? Pete Alonso puts up like zero value defensively. I mean, he is probably should be DHing. He's a very poor defensive first baseman. Doesn't run the bases particularly well. What you need from Pete is a lot of home runs, and if he's not hitting the ball quite as hard and he's not slugging quite as well, then that's a big red flag because that his value is totally tied up in that. And at 30 years old and is showing some signs of the last couple of years haven't been quite the same as the first few years were. There's definitely a reason that a team didn't give him a huge contract. But on Pete's standpoint, I understand why he would believe he needs a huge contract. I mean, he's got what? He's been in the big league 6 years. He's hit 226 home runs. I mean, he hits a lot of home runs, hits for a lot of power. He's been pretty clutch for the Mets. Obviously he hit the big home run in the playoffs last year to send them to the past the Brewers. Um, and he fits the Mets. I mean, he's been kind of their heart and soul since he's been there. That he's a very recognizable name. People there like him. I I mean, I think it was a good on the Mets and good on Pete for kind of having a reunion here and getting it back together, because I don't know that Pete Alonso would have fit anywhere else, and I don't think there's a better fit for the Mets than what he brings to the table as a team that doesn't have a ton of slug as it is, in needing a guy who hits home runs. So I definitely think that this is a good fit. The money is totally kind of in line with what I would give him on this one of these short-term AAV deals. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I could see a scenario where Pete Alonso has a repeat of 2019 where he hits 50 home runs and has 5 WAR,
Yeah.
and then signs a giant contract. And then I see a scenario where he just kind of keeps the same, like 2023, 2024 decline a little bit. He's just not ever going to get back to that level. So it's going to be very crucial 2025 for him. But it definitely helps the Mets because they really had a hole there, and they were able to fill it with a guy that they really like.
Yeah, I always felt like Pete going back to the Mets made a bunch of sense. I know there was talk about like Vientos getting moved to first base, but I think there is some concerns that Vientos' 2024 isn't quite repeatable for him
Yeah.
yet either. A lot of his underlying numbers scream there's some regression, uh, you know, there that can happen. So I think bringing Pete back at least helps on that front as like, hey, if Vientos does back up a little bit, at least we have a known power hitter and Pete here that can hit us at least 30 homers there or not. So, there were some rumors about like Toronto or whatever where he could go DH, but I always thought the Mets just made the most sense. What was David saying? Hope y'all mentioned Pete saying it was always the
I
Mets
didn't
like
I
getting
didn't see
almost
that,
split
but
like 3 times in the
yeah.
saga. No, I mean we mentioned that. Like we said that there were some times where it didn't seem like that he was going to come back. And they had pretty much said they were going to move on, but they ended up working on a deal. I think Pete's number came down to a level where the
Yeah.
Mets were comfortable with it. I feel like when that was happening, Pete was still looking for a 5 or 6 year deal, like 25 million or 20 million per year or whatever at that point. So it made sense for the Mets to always bring him back at the position they were in. They weren't willing to go to the number, and that's why they waited it out and got it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's still a good fit. Like, and Pete's also one of the clubhouse leaders there. Like, as much as that doesn't get talked about, that
Absolutely.
is still a big deal. Him and Lindor. So we'll see how Pete, if those numbers that are, showed some regression, if he's able to turn those around and get himself a big deal next year. Because I mean, we don't know if Vlad's extension is going to get done or not. So Pete could go into the next offseason as the top first baseman on the market again. And did he have the QO? I don't think he had the QO.
I thought he did, but I'm not
Let me
sure.
see. He did have the
Um,
QO, so he'd go into the next offseason without it, regardless.
right.
So that'll be another thing to watch for. But okay, so let's talk about, I guess, the last kind of like free agent real contract that we have. I guess we could talk about the other one too, but Clayton Kershaw re-signed with the Dodgers on a 1 year, $7.5 million deal. He gets 1 million for each game started for game 13, 14, 15, 16, and also days active bonus. So if he's on that active roster for 30 days, he gets 2.5 million. 60 days gets 1 million, and 90 days gets another million. This is all saying because he had foot and knee surgery in the offseason. So he's not going to be back probably until around the end of May, if not into June. And there's even been some speculation about maybe that's going to be pushed towards more like the All-Star break, depending on where the pitching situation is there for the Dodgers. But I mean, we all knew Clayton was going to come back to the Dodgers. He said it in the World Series parade, like he's going to spend his career with the Dodgers. They were going to work something out, and I think this is a very fair deal for his value nowadays.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for me was not where is Clayton Kershaw going to play. It is Clayton Kershaw going to play? I think that just he's obviously I believe he's a pretty big family guy and stuff. So he hasn't, and he's dealt with so many injuries and stuff over the
Yeah,
last several years that I just felt like there was a chance that he would end up just deciding it wasn't worth it to come back again. He just won his second World Series. So, um, I mean, I think that he definitely is. He's accomplished everything that a pitcher could want to accomplish. I mean, he's probably not going to get to some of the milestones. Oh, never mind. He's going to get 3,000 strikeouts this year. Um,
potentially. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if he's going to have to get what 32 strikeouts. I didn't realize he didn't. I thought he got it last year. Must be
Mm-mm.
thinking of someone else. Um, But yeah, I mean, Clayton Kershaw will get his 3,000th strikeout. Obviously wins aren't quite as highly thought of anymore. He's not going to have a chance anymore at 300 wins. At least before the last few years, there was some thought that he might be able to get close to that because of,
Yeah.
he's at 212. He's barely gotten any over the last 5 years because of injuries. So, I mean, Clayton Kershaw, does he help the Dodgers this year? Maybe. Last year wasn't particularly good when he pitched. Now he only pitched in 30 innings and pitched in 7 games. It's hard to judge him off of that.
Yeah.
I mean, his
I
velocity was down. He's injured. I mean, we just don't know how healthy he is. I mean, if
yeah.
he's probably, if he pitches and he does come back and he's healthy ish, then I would expect a 3.5 ERA from him
Yeah.
type thing, which is good. That's definitely worth
Yeah.
the contract they gave him. It's a matter to me of is he actually going to be healthy at all? I mean,
I
and it's just so hard to say. There's really no way to predict that.
Yeah, I will say, like, watching Clayton last year, it was clear he wasn't
Yeah.
healthy. He
Oh
also
yeah. I
had
mean,
that major offseason shoulder surgery, which is like his first big one ever. But what he didn't tell people until actually the World Series, basically parade day, is he was pitching with a bone spur in his toe and a torn meniscus in his left leg. So that, which is his drive leg down the mound. So it was very clear that something was wrong this last
yeah,
year. I mean, even if you look at 2023, he had a 2.46 ERA that year. The peripherals don't quite back that up, but it's better than his 4.50 that it was this last year
yeah,
and a 4.59 expected ERA. So I think, I mean, he said at that point he was going to come back. So I'm not surprised to see him back this
yeah,
year because he had that major arm surgery and only pitched 30 innings. I just am interested to see, like, hey, you've got the meniscus, you've got the bone spur out, which you weren't able to do the offseason before because of the shoulder. Now you couldn't have 3 surgeries in an offseason, really. Now what are you going to do for this part? But he doesn't need to prove anything. Like, I think he wants to come back to see if he can still do it at this point. And the team's going to
yeah,
be so good still. He's still going to bring a bunch of knowledge to that pitching staff too. And
yeah.
we've already seen, like, Blake Snell basically, like, say, like, hey, I want my locker right next to Clayton's. I don't want to leave his side. Like, there's a ton he could still do with
Yeah.
this
Oh,
organization. So
absolutely. I mean, there's no downside to bringing Clayton Kershaw back. I mean, this guy's an inner circle Hall of Fame pitcher. He's one of the greatest to ever do it. I mean, there was a time before the injuries last several years that we thought he could end up being in like the Greg Maddux, Randy Johnson, Roger Clemens conversation. Like he was that good up until the injuries, and he's still been good, but it's just he hasn't been able to put up the volume to match those guys. We were looking at a guy who might end up getting like around 100 WAR, which is incredibly rare for a pitcher, especially in this modern era of baseball. So, I mean, he's a one of the greatest to ever do it. Never a bad idea to bring him back. I don't know how much he's going to help on the field,
yeah,
but it's a good signing.
yeah. And then just to mention while we're talking Dodgers there, Shohei Ohtani has started throwing bullpens.
Yep.
94 miles an hour right now, which is expected at that point.
Yeah.
He's still not planned to pitch until like middle of May at that point, but he's at least throwing. And a little wrinkle, I don't kind of often know. Look like he's actually developed a windup now, not
Hmm,
out of the stretch. He was
know
seen in his
that.
bullpen actually doing a windup a little bit. So another interesting little fact, but
Yeah, might be just be trying it out, but we'll see if it sticks.
maybe. So let's talk about from one superstar who has dealt with some injuries to another superstar that has dealt with some injuries too, and that is Mike Trout. Um, he first off, he looks super super slim this year. I don't know if you saw that picture of him. He looks very much in better shape. Um, but he had a meeting with the Angels, and something that he's been really reluctant to do in the past too, which is move off of center field. They've come to the decision that's now going to happen. He's going to be the main right fielder this year. They'll mix in some DH days, and they said maybe he might get some center field time still too, depending on how things go. But this is an eye towards trying to keep him healthy. I mean, if you're looking at Trout, who hasn't played a full season of over 150 games since 2016. It's been 114, 140, 134. Then the COVID season, he had 53, which is about the full season, but still it's only 53. Then 36, 119, 82, and only 29 last year. So he's fully healthy now and moving off to right field, so maybe that gives him a little bit more sustainability injury wise. But what do you think about Trout finally moving off to right field?
Well, I think it definitely is something that is probably a good thing for him. Center fielders get beat up worse than anybody else in the outfield. Granted, I don't know that any of Mike Trout's injuries have been while playing the outfield. I think, being at the plate, he's had a couple of injuries like the hamate bone, and I think he's had some calf strains that were really bad that I think, got run in the bases. Of course, wear and tear in the outfield definitely
Yeah.
hurts that. Right field's kind of interesting. I know that Mike Trout's his only weakness throughout his entire career that you could even consider pointing to is his arm. And of course, right field is the part of the outfield where you want to put your best arm. So I think it's interesting that he would go to right instead of left. Um, Obviously, I think they got Taylor Ward in left, so they might feel
Yeah.
like Mike Trout's arm is better than Taylor Ward's, which is very possible.
Or he's just a
Um,
better defender, just
He's
in
well,
general.
he is a better defender in general,
Yeah.
but range-wise, I don't think it matters left versus right. I think the biggest thing is arm, putting your arm in right. But either way, I mean, Mike Trout in 2024 at his 29 games, he really did show some promising things at the plate. His strikeout rates over the past 5 years, ever since 2020, have crept up and gotten into the upper 20s and really on the borderline of being too high. In 2023, in his 82 games, he put up a 29% strikeout rate. Last year, it was down to 21% in his 126 plate appearances, which is a small sample size, but it's not a zero sample size. There's some reason to believe there. He had a 139 WRC plus despite a 194 batting average on balls in play, which is 150 points below his career average in that statistic. So I think Mike Trout still got something at the plate, assuming that he's healthy. Hopefully this helps keep him healthy. I know he also mentioned possibly DHing a little bit too, which would be very good for him to get days where he doesn't have to play the outfield at all. That could be weird with the Angels because they brought in Jorge Soler, who is got a DH. So obviously you would prefer to play Mike Trout than Jorge Soler, just who you're playing. But who are you going to throw out there in the outfield then? And that becomes a problem for the Angels because they don't have a lot of depth. So I definitely I like that Mike Trout's starting to kind of think about how am I going to help the team best. We were talking about that with Devers earlier. Mike Trout's starting to think, hey, I can't just say I'm the center fielder and come out there and then get hurt, and that hurts the team more than anything else. So, hopefully we get 162 games of Mike Trout and he's healthy and he puts up 10 more and he has the position player equivalent of what Chris Sale did last year, where you just didn't think this guy was ever going to get healthy again, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, boom, MVP, boom, Cy Young. I'm hoping that the Mike Trout does that this year, and we'll see. He's
Only
it's going to
33.
sound he's only 33.
Only
He's not.
33.
We were talking a minute ago about Clayton Kershaw being old. Clayton Kershaw's 37. Mike Trout's only 33. There are a lot of really good 33-year-old players that break out at 33 years old.
Mhm.
So hopefully Mike Trout can get healthy and finally and part of it also is just bad luck too. I mean, some of
Yeah.
these injuries he's had hamate bone, that's bad luck.
Hmm.
That's not injury prone, that's bad
No.
luck. So
Yeah.
hopefully he has some better luck in 2025 and we want to see Mike Trout play a full season. I don't think there's anybody in baseball that doesn't want to see that.
Yeah. I want to see what a 2022 level Mike Trout can be if he played a full season. He played 119 games that year, hit 40 homers, and had 6 WAR with a
Yeah.
176 WRC plus. Like, he still has it in there, very much so. Like, he just needs to stay healthy and get some luck,
Yeah.
like you said, with like hamate bone and stuff like that. But man, just give us baseball gods, please, just give us a healthy Mike
Jameis
Trout.
Winston wanted to be delivered from pick sixes. We wanted to be delivered from Mike Trout
Yeah.
injuries.
I think the two things baseball fans were asking for was Shohei Ohtani in the playoffs and a healthy Mike Trout. We got the Ohtani in the playoffs. Just give us healthy Mike Trout now, please.
Now we don't want Ohtani in the playoffs.
Well, anyways, let's stay on brand here and talk about somebody that is not ever going to be healthy again. It seems like with
Does
the
he
Angels
want to
here.
be healthy is the question.
I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know if the baseball gods want him either. And that is Anthony Rendon. He has notoriously not been able to stay healthy in his Angels tenure. The most games he's played in a season is 58. And
that was the COVID
20,
year, wasn't it?
no, it was 2021.
Okay,
2020, he played 52 games at that point.
gotcha. That was
Um,
his best WAR season. Was the COVID year, wasn't it?
yeah, 2.5 WAR. Since then, he's put up point 0.2, point 0.9, point 0.2, and negative point 0.1.
Sheesh,
Um,
insane.
so Anthony Rendon has not been able to stay healthy, and it has now come out again that he needs to have hip surgery, and he's basically out all of this year again. Mind you, his contract only runs through next season, as it
Oh,
was or as it is. It only runs through 2026. And there's even been some rumblings. I mean, before this, even that, his wife wanted him to retire. There's been some rumblings that maybe he's just going to retire. Um,
yeah.
Now, I don't know if that would be smart for him because if he retires, he forfeits that
Yeah,
money.
that's what I was gonna say.
And it's only
This is gonna be a
a
Strasburg situation.
Strasburg thing. He is on the books for what, $38 million in cash next year. So don't know if I see him doing that, wanting to retire there. But I would be shocked, basically, to say as if we see Anthony Rendon in another game for the Angels, or even another game in Major League Baseball in general.
Yeah, that I'm with you. I wonder if the Angels might work something out with him and say, look, you can go ahead and retire if you forfeit 20 million, if half of that or something. Like we'll pay you half of it. I don't know that he would do that, but he would at least then not even have to show effort toward coming back. And I don't know. I mean, it's a tough situation. I mean, I feel for Anthony Rendon sometimes because I think a lot of things that he has said in the past that make people believe he doesn't like baseball are taken out of context a little bit. And I think a lot of what he has said has been more of my priorities are my family and my religion higher than baseball, which is something that I think is totally fair for anybody to say, even a Major League Baseball player who loves baseball. But when you start talking about how many injuries he's had and then just seems like the lack of urgency to come back from injuries, like he doesn't seem like he really wants to play. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's part of it too. It's unfortunate, man. I hate it because I really thought Anthony Rendon was one of the best players in baseball when he was with Washington, and I thought when he signed with the Angels that it was a safe signing. Really, I know
Hmm.
he had dealt with some injuries with the Nationals, but he had never been like somebody who just never could get on the field at all. And he wasn't that old, and he was coming off an MVP caliber season. And I thought that I was wrong about that signing. And it really goes to show you that if you're a front office in baseball, you really need to vet your players you're signing at a high level. And the clubhouse part of it, the interview part of it, that part should be important as along with how good the player has been in the past.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of issues there with Rendon, and like you mentioned, I agree. I don't think there's very much chance that he plays for the Angels again, certainly, and I don't think he's going to play for another team either. I think the only chance he plays again is if the Angels say you will not retire, and he has to show up to play a couple games next year. I mean, that's the to get his money. That's the only way that I think Anthony Rendon plays again. But you never know. But
Yeah.
I'm it's sad. So
Yeah. I mean, I was a big proponent of Rendon at that time too. I mean, during that free agency period, I thought he was the best available free agent at the time. I mean, it was Garrett Cole, Strasburg, and Rendon were like the top three free agents that class, um, if I remember right. And two of those contracts have kind of aged very horrible. So it really sucks. I don't want to see any player ever go through this. I think, especially you're talking about some of his context, I think they've been taken out of context a little bit more, but because of his lack of urgency to seem like he wants to play and his kind of like lack of care to play, I think people take some of the comments and push it more over there. But you also have to be willing to prove that those comments aren't really there, and he just hasn't been willing to.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, I wish he could get healthy and come back and prove us all
Oh,
wrong,
I
but
agree.
it's just I don't see it
Yeah.
happening. But um, all right, so last little thing let's hit on while we are here, which is a news that just broke basically as we were getting ready to go live here, and that is the Arizona Diamondbacks signing Geraldo Perdomo to a 4-year, $45 million contract extension that also has a club option in it. The deal starts in 2026, so next season, and will buy out 3 of his free agency years. Perdomo is a 25-year-old kind of Gold Glove level caliber shortstop, super super good there. Offensively, his career is an 85 WRC plus player. This last year he put up 101 more or 101 WRC plus 2.0 WAR there. So I think he's just a really solid fit. He's not going to be a player that kind of wows you doing anything, but he's a glue guy. At the end of the day, he's someone who's going to put up competitive at bats. He doesn't strike out a ton. He's going to play really good defense at shortstop.
Yeah, I think Geraldo Perdomo is like your perfect like bottom three in the order, good defender. I mean, he's perfect at that. He's a everyday player. He puts up the stat that the 2 to 3 WAR every year. That's the type of guy you won't play in those positions, those that spot. And I think he's good at it. Last year, he really did better than that. I mean, he was an above average hitter, 101, granted, but he only played 98 games. He put up 2 WAR. I mean, and obviously, if you put in another, he was probably would have been over 3 WAR if he had played the full season. So I think I forgot what injury he was dealing with. So maybe he can crack 5 home runs this year, but we'll see about that. But definitely the type of player you want in your lineup at the bottom end, getting on base for your good top of your lineup there with Corbin Carroll and the others. So definitely like the signing for Arizona. They don't have to break the bank and they buy out free agent years.
Yeah, I think it's a really good deal. It's going to be interesting too to see what they do long term because they do have a really good top prospect shortstop there in Jordan Lawler coming up.
Yeah, Jordan Lawler is interesting because I think if I remember correctly, there was some chance that he might move to third eventually.
Yeah, I wouldn't
And
doubt it. He was very injury. He had a bunch of injuries this
he
last year.
did. And
So
yeah. I was gonna say I think I remember from like his scouting reports and stuff that he had a chance to be a really good shortstop, but that he might end up being a little bit stiff for it and could move to third and be like an elite third baseman, kind of like in the Alex Bregman mold.
yeah,
But that might not be fully accurate, but definitely a very good prospect for sure.
yeah. So it's just gonna be interesting to see what they do long term. But it's a good deal for the Diamondbacks with Perdomo, regardless, because he can even then turn
Yep.
into a good
Super utility.
utility guy
Yep.
if he needs to there. So. But anyways, I think that's all the news we really have to hit on and talk about here. Like we mentioned, the spring training it's in full swing. We get games this week, so be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout for any weird injuries. This is always a time we see someone just like, yeah, I slipped and cut my finger when I was trying to make dinner. I don't. It's gonna be weird instances that happen like that. So just be on the lookout for those. But Matt, anything else you want to wrap up on before we head out here?
I don't think so. You hit the nail on the head with that. I do think there's a chance we still see a big trade at some point.
Interesting.
A surprise trade of some kind. Like it seems like every year we have something that happens during spring training that everyone kind of gets on, kind of sneaks up on everybody. Um, I think there's a few teams out there that maybe missed out on some guys or could bolster their team. The Cubs are one that has a lot of pieces that could be moved, and there's some holes there that if they're going to compete, they really need to fill a couple of holes. The Braves could definitely still use pitching. I think that you never know too. Teams like maybe like the Mariners, the Astros, if the Tigers just missed out on Bregman, like could they try to swing a trade for somebody? Um, I think there's a very good chance of something like that happening, but definitely excited. Baseball's back. College baseball started this weekend. I don't know that we mentioned that. Um, so that was cool. I didn't see too many games. I watched Auburn play, but I was more focused on Auburn basketball, which is awesome. But I hadn't really seen too much other college baseball, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I know there's a lot of really good early season tournaments in college baseball that you see a lot of top draft type guys match up with each other. So that could be something to look out for over the next couple of weeks as well. But yeah, everything's great with got baseball back. I'm ready to see some games here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll talk about it some more. So
Yeah, and one thing is it'll happen before tomorrow or as tomorrow happens is the potential Vlad Jr. extension. The
yep,
deadline for him to get it done is tomorrow morning, basically when he steps out of his car at the spring training facility, apparently. So be on the lookout for that because that's going to tell us a bunch of what to expect moving forward
yep,
in this next season, looking
yep.
towards the off season. So
One last thing I want to mention: we have been slacking on our deep dive
Yes.
season previews over the last couple weeks, but we are going to pick it back up. I've been working on the Nationals preview, so that should be uploaded in the next couple of days. I think David and I are going to record it after the show tonight, so be on the lookout for that. So we'll be getting back on those here more regularly over the next few weeks as the season gets closer and the moves have been finalized and
Yeah.
baseball starts to ramp up. So.
Yeah, and as I'm back too, I can help more with those. So, but anyways, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we will catch you guys back on the next one.